Okay, we're here. We're alive. I want to thank you all for joining me today. If you can hear me clearly, please drop a one in the live chat and then we can get today's show started. Once again, if you can hear me clearly, please drop a one in the live chat and then we can get today's show started. And while I'm waiting for the ones to come in, if you haven't already and you're new to the channel, please make sure you subscribe to the channel as well as hit the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. Also, please make sure you hit the like button as well. That way, the video will permeate throughout the YouTube algorithm and will send this video out to those who they feel needs to see it. And also, as well, lastly, please make sure you share this stream on your social media platforms. So, I see the ones are starting to come into the live chat. So let's get into this very quickly. And I'm gonna say it even though I shouldn't say it. I don't believe we're gonna be here too long, which normally curses you. That means you're gonna be on for an hour. But I think I'll be able to get through this within 15 minutes. Because unfortunately, I will not be able to play clips from RFK Jr. on Math Hoffa's podcast, My Expert Opinions. I won't be able to play clips concerning his statement on reparations, but I did still want to speak to what he said, and I will also give you the timestamps as well to when he actually addressed it. So recently, RFK was on Math Hoffa's podcast, My Expert Opinion, and the topic of reparations came up. And when the topic of reparations came up, as usual, when it comes to anyone that's being asked about that, they immediately begin to dance in circles, or I should say, talk in circles, right? They walk you around the block in order to get to their initial point concerning reparations. And what RFK Jr. proceeded to do was, as opposed to just getting straight into his answer concerning reparations, how he masked it to essentially get around to telling you no cash payments was that he started off telling a story about how his father, right, RFK Sr., visited Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken. That's where Biggie Smalls is from, back in the 60s, I believe it was. And he discussed how his father fell in love with the black community in Bed-Stuy. And he went on to explain and speak on how he witnessed the extreme poverty that Black Americans were living under in Bed-Stuy. And he saw that these were good people. He fell in love with them and fell in love with the community. But what he noticed, right? And this is what RFK Jr. said about his father. He said what he noticed is that there weren't a lot of Black businesses in the community. And now you already see where this is going, right? From that point on, RFK Jr. proceeded to discuss how Black Americans suffer from being able to have access to startup capital in order for them to create businesses. And he said that when his father noticed this and this came upon him that Black Americans are struggling to get essentially loans to start up businesses, RFK Sr. put together a program that then gave Black Americans in Bed-Stuy access to capital to start businesses, right? And he would further go on to say, in a very kind of cliche sense, when Black businesses are thriving, it's not just good for Black people, but it's good for America, right? So it's very cliche, kind of typical response that you would expect from him, right? And it's at the 5 minute mark. If you do go back and watch this, at the 5 minute mark is when he actually gives his reason for why he doesn't support cash payments. And he talked about how I believe it was 20% of his for 20% of his career, he worked alongside Native Americans who were trying to come to a conclusion on how to distribute funds from casinos, if I remember correctly, throughout Native American communities. And he said one of the tribe members or tribe leaders was very adamant about cash being permeated throughout the community would be a disaster, right? It shouldn't be in the form of cash. So ultimately, what ended up happening is you had one tribe that took the funds from the casinos, and as opposed to giving out cash payments, what they did was put the money in institutions by way of bank loans, grants, school scholarships, and creating other institutions, right? And then he gave the other example of the other tribe who essentially gave out cash payments, and allegedly it was a disaster, according to RFK Jr. And then that's when he made the point to say very directly, I would be against cash payments. He said he would be against cash payments ultimately because it would be a disaster. And ultimately, what that comes down to is the Gucci reparations argument, right? If you give Black Americans cash payments directly, they're going to buy, they're going to buy big packs of Loud, they're going to buy rims, cars with spinners on them. You're going to buy all type of Gucci, Louis, Fendi, and Prada, and you're not going to do anything productive or constructive with the money. So as opposed to giving you cash payments, what we're going to give you are school scholarships, business loans, and things of that nature, and other institutions that may or may not help you, right? And one thing that really stood out to me, that I was glad that someone did address on the podcast, is that RFK discussed how if we repair the Black community by way of issuing out loans for Black Americans to be able to create their own businesses, then it will be less polarizing for white Americans to be able to accept. That was what he stated. And this brother right here, and I'll show you who he is. Let me fast forward a little bit. It was this brother here in the black who gave pushback to that, right? He gave pushback to that. And he made the point in the statement that why is it that our reparations should be determined upon the feelings of white America? He stated that our reparations should have nothing to do with your feelings, right? Not RFK Jr., but with the feelings of white America. You're repaying a debt, nothing more, nothing less, right? And I agree with that. The idea that reparations can only be done in a manner that makes white America feel comfortable is completely absurd and ridiculous. It's only when you're talking about reparations for the descendants of slavery, descendants of American slavery, that all of a sudden we have to take in what everybody else feels about it, right? That's the only time that you'll see that we have to take in what everyone else feels about it. But when it comes to anything else, like the conflict happening in Europe, to which I believe, what is it, $113 billion has been given to the president of that country, that's having issues with Putin right now. What you think and how you feel means nothing. It means nothing. They don't care about what you think and how you feel. They don't care about what the American people think and how they feel. And that's the case with anything that this American government wants to do. It does what it wants to do, regardless of your feelings. But when it comes to the descendants of American slavery and reparations, now all of a sudden we have to consider how everyone else feels. And RFK Jr.'s position on reparations is that if we give out cash payments, it would be too polarizing and it would create more issues between Black Americans and white Americans. But as the brother in the black shirt said, and I agree with him, if white Americans have an issue with reparations in the form of cash payments, then that isn't my problem, right? That isn't my issue. And I 100% agree. But I also want to go back to what RFK Jr. was stating concerning repairing the Black community now by way of restoring Black businesses. Because RFK Jr. made it a point to state, we need to rebuild the Black community. So he acknowledged that. And another thing that was very interesting too is that RFK Jr. was very knowledgeable of the plight of Black America, how things have gotten as bad as it was, and why things stay that way. He acknowledged systemic racism. He acknowledged its role that it plays today in maintaining the racial wealth gap. He acknowledged how the big 19, I'll call it, devastated black businesses, and that those black businesses aren't coming back. He understands the role that slavery, Jim Crow, black codes, and all these things, how they played a role in completely destabilizing the black community. So I thought that was interesting that he was actually very knowledgeable on these things. He admitted that systemic racism is a real thing and that it's an issue for black people. But in doing all this, he still defaulted to kind of the same old talking point and position that we need to do something that's not just good for Black Americans, but is good for everyone. And that's palatable for everyone, despite knowing the facts of how the Black community got into the position that it was in. Right. And he said that really, essentially, the only way that we're going to do that is by restoring Black businesses. So for him, reparations should come in the form essentially through institution building by way of loans to build black businesses, because when you rebuild black businesses, you then rebuild the black community. So essentially what he wants to give you is business loans for reparations. And I don't want to lose this point. When he stated you rebuild the black community by way of rebuilding businesses, it, that's not necessarily incorrect, right? I don't disagree with that point of view, because I believe that to be true. If you rebuild black businesses and the black community, then you rebuild the black community. I mean, that is a true statement. But the issue is that when it comes to that, essentially what that parlays into is nothing that's any different from what Joe Biden said concerning Build Back Better. Unless those loans and the business building and institution building is going to be something that is specifically and explicitly for the descendants of American slavery, well, then essentially you're still saying nothing. And he never made that distinct point, that point, as it pertains to providing business loans for Black Americans, right? He didn't really speak to that too much. He didn't really go into too much detail about it. He said he used the program that his father enlisted in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, as a model that we can use to create businesses in the Black community. But ultimately, like I said, in my opinion, what all that boils down to is just another remixed version of Build Back Better, where what we're going to do is not give out loans and grants specifically to the descendants of American slavery to build up their communities, but what we're going to do is issue these out to people of color, minorities, and marginalized groups, right? Because you always, and once again as well, just Z1, I want to highlight this, what you just said. But before I do that, thank you very much, Ross McKins, for the $5 super chat. Ross said, I don't hear RFK Jr. speaking on African American, what's it, AM, Friedman, and the wealth gap. Yeah, well, he spoke on the wealth gap here with Math Hoffa, but he's not interested in giving out cash payments. He wants to give you guys bank loans, right? And as Just Z one stated, you pay loans back. Exactly. So it's not like he said that we're going to give out grants and loans that Black Americans don't have to pay back. We'll just give you these loans to build up your businesses. No, these are loans that you're going to have to pay back. So your reparations is going to come by way of bank loans that if your business fails, now you're even further in debt than you were prior to attempting to start up the business. You know, that doesn't sound like reparations to me, right? This is just another one of many programs that many politicians claim that they support. Many of them claim that, like Biden, that they're already instituting, right, by way of racial equality executive orders that makes it easier for you to get loans. But despite that, year after year, studies and reports continue to come out showing that Black Americans are being denied business loans, right? So essentially what RFK wants to do is put in place a program that has proven itself to already not be successful, right? Because these programs already exist. They're already here. And unless you're going to make it a point to say these programs are specifically and exclusively um, for Black American descendants of slavery, then essentially you're just talking about Joe Biden's Build Back Better program, where we're going to give an opportunity for all people of color, minority, and marginalized groups to have access to business loans. We've been there, we've done that, and we've seen this already. But in short, in closing now, he was very clear on one thing, and I quote, "I would be against cash payments." So as it pertains to reparations concerning RFK Jr., he's not dealing with cash payments. And in my opinion, also, once again, in closing, and I've stated this multiple times before in the past, when you're talking about reparations, if the conversation around reparations is void of cash payments, then that conversation is an illegitimate conversation on reparations. You're no longer talking about reparations. You're talking about something else now. Reparations is cash payments, right? That's what reparations is. Anything outside of that is a reparative justice program, is what I'd call it. Reparative or restorative justice program, right? And if you want to do that, I guess that's cool if that's what you want to do, right? In terms of as far as politicians go, but to conflate and to confuse that with reparations, in my opinion, is criminal. Honestly, it's criminal. That isn't reparations. You know, home loans, bank loans, giving you access to capital. That's not reparations. You cannot call that reparations, right? These are just programs that already exist and that's been existing. When you're talking about reparations, you're talking about cash payments. And it doesn't have to exclusively be cash payments. It could be cash payments plus bank loans and home loans and things of that nature. But if you've excluded cash payments out completely altogether, then, like I said, you're not talking about reparations anymore. You're speaking about something else. So with all that being said, that does it for today's stream. And I will make it a point right now before I leave to give you all the link to that interview, right? So give me just a moment while I provide you all with the link to the RFK on Math Hoffa interview. And then I will let you all go on about your day. So once again, it's Math Hoffa, my expert opinion. Here is the link. I just left it in the live chat, and there you go. And I will also make sure to leave the link in the description box below once the live stream is over. So there are 319 of you in here right now. Please make sure you hit the like button on your way out. Please hit the like button on your way out. Thank you very much, Michael Davis, for your support to today's stream. And also thank you very much, Val Williams, for your support to today's stream. The support that you all show me on this channel is very much needed and much appreciated. And I thank you dearly. And with all that being said, that does it for today's live stream. Please hit the like button on your way out, and I will catch you all on the next one. Peace.